ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with scarcity here and trying to deal with scarcity. We're trying to have a better, more individual and societal welfare for everybody, wealthier and healthier. We know that in economics, people act within their own self interest. We know they make choices around that self interest, and those choices have costs. And most people don't go zero sum, they usually think at the margin. However, for this section, section number five, we have rule number five because this section is so important. It is that incentives matter. What is an incentive? Well, an incentive, simply put, is an action or policy that encourages individuals to act in a particular way by increasing the benefit of their actions. So I make it so when you make a choice, you receive an additional benefit from that because of some kind of policy that I'm creating. The reverse of that is a disincentive. A disincentive is an action or policy that discourages individuals to act in a particular way by increasing the cost of a choice. Hey, don't act that way, or the cost is going to be so high, it's going to discourage you from actually making a choice in the first place. So, in economics, we understand that people respond to incentives in predictable ways most of the time. Most economists can tell you how people are going to react to a policy most of the time. People don't like to usually don't like the results of that sometimes, and they won't listen to economists. And other times, economists just things happen that we don't really foresee, and that's one of the hard parts of economics. But you can see is incentives everywhere. How do you actually potty train a toddler? Well, there's two ways you can do it, of course. You can incentivize and say, hey, if you use the potty, then I'm going to offer you some kind of reward or praise or something else. That's a form of a positive incentive. It could be a negative incentive. You can take something away from that toddler. You can maybe spank the toddler or punish the toddler. That would be considered a disincentive. How do you eliminate traffic? Well, you can make cars traveling more expensive, charge them by the mile, put up a bunch of tolls as a disincentive to drive. Or you can create communities that are less drivable and more dense, or you put in HOV lanes or carpool lanes and that kind of thing. All these things are driven by the idea of incentives. So, how do you get people to care about climate change? Well, you're going to have to figure out a way either to make things that are bad for climate change cost more by using incentives, or to get things that benefit climate change to cost less as a primary incentive. Like, here's an example of using incentives. Fertility rates per women around the world, in the developed world, fertility rates are going down. This is the number of children that are had per woman. Africa is the only continent, if you look up here at Nigeria, where fertility rates are still really high. Most places around the world, for economy to work, it needs to be a replacement rate of two, essentially two children per woman. And most of the world is well below that in the developed world. So how do we encourage people to have more kids in the developed world? Well, those different types of incentives. You can literally pay women or couples to have children. Some countries around the world, they put up lotteries and games to have couples that have children getting an incentive. You make it easier or cheaper to have children. You can promote cheaper health care, cheaper child care, cheaper universities. You could promote immigration. Part of the reason the United States does not really feel low fertility rates is because they have a very healthy immigration system. And so, immigrants have more children, bang, you don't have a problem with fertility, and you might promote more religious behavior. Communities that are more religious, by and large, have more children. And of course, that's not to say that religion is good or bad, but people that are more religious are more likely to have more children. If you want to incentivize population growth, that might be an example. Or you can do it like Denmark did it. Denmark had a whole series and a campaign of commercials and advertisements online and on television about, like, going and basically having sex. Okay, well, sex will create babies, and they called it "Do It for Denmark." And look, if you do it, you're gonna have grandparents, and your families are gonna be happier, and da da da. And they offered baby clothes and carriages and vacations for people that had more children. Did it work? Did this kind of sexualized incentive actually work? And the answer is it kind of did. 9 months after the campaign, they saw a mini baby boom in Denmark. So there's different kinds of incentives. Now, the primary incentive is money. And money is actually really inexpensive to administer because you literally just give somebody money and that's an incentive. You don't have to make some kind of complicated scheme. If you just give them money, they have the freedom to do what they want with that money. And so money becomes a pretty common incentive. The problem with money is it also makes people cheat. because people will think about, well, I want that money so much that I'm going to do something in a negative way. Like, if, if you pay people to take tests, they will try to cheat on that test. They will be more likely to do so because the incentive is kind of perverted. Now, in economics, we look at price and we say price is what? Price is a value, is a measurement of overall value. But economist Alec Tabarrok from George Mason University calls price a signal wrapped in an incentive. It actually provides something to producers and consumers. Think about this. This is a lemon. All things remaining normal, lemons are pretty much the same. Are you more likely as a consumer to buy a 25-cent lemon or a 50-cent lemon? The answer is you're going to buy the 25-cent lemon because it's cheaper. The incentive is the cheaper one provides you more benefit. I save a quarter. So this is an example of a price wrapped in a signal. The price is a signal wrapped in an incentive. The signal is I should buy the cheaper one, and the incentive is I'll save 25 cents. So when we see prices of things start to go down, it becomes an incentive for two different groups. For consumers, it's a signal I should buy more because it's cheaper, but it's also a signal to producers to actually make less because it's the price I'm paying is less than it could be. So I'm not going to make as much. So I will actually lose less money on each transaction. Same thing if the market price goes up, it becomes an incentive to the reverse. When the price rises, the consumer says, well, I'm actually gaining less benefit, so I will buy less. That's the signal of a raising price. Producers actually make more when the price goes up. And this is where people get often confused about, like they'll say, well, corporations are being greedy when prices are going up. No, there's an issue with supply and demand. Producers are being greedy only in that they will produce as much as they can when the price actually rises. They're not going to hoard because they're leaving money on the table. This is why in the summertime, when prices go up, it's because people drive more, people fly more, people take more cruises. Oil companies are going to produce as much oil as possible, and they're pumping out oil like crazy. Refineries will often break down, prices go up, but they want to produce as much as possible to make as much money. Same with egg producers. Remember when eggs went up in the year 2022, people were like, well, egg producers are being greedy. No, they're not. A bunch of chickens died, and as prices rise, they want to like produce as many eggs as possible to make as much money. So that's the signal. Even drug cartels, when the price of avocados went up because demand went up so high, avocado farmers ended up getting taken over by cartels because drug cartels noticed that the price of avocados was so high they had to get in on the business. So they wanted to produce more to make more money. Okay. Now, all these incentives can create positive and negative externalities because you use incentives to drive populations to also make choices. And remember that you're trying to create a policy that increases the benefits of positive externalities and increase the cost of negative externalities. Problem is that sometimes populations work in ways you would not necessarily expect. Remember, people respond to incentives in predictable ways most of the time. So this is where perverse incentives come in. Now, perverse incentives are incentives that result in an unintended negative externality. Okay, like we put out this incentive, we thought it was the right thing, and shocker, the whole population acted in a totally negative way. And that negative externality, by the way, when you see a negative externality that you just completely missed when you were doing your research, that is known as an unintended consequence. It's an impact overall that you did not anticipate. And some examples of this are known as the Cobra effect. Basically, in India in the 1700s, there was a cobra infestation in a city known as Bombay. They were getting into kids' rooms, biting babies, doing all this stuff. So the mayor of Bombay actually put forth an edict that for every Cobra hood that you brought, that person would get paid. Kill the cobras, cobras would go away, right? No, cobras actually doubled. Why? Because people started breeding cobras, cutting off their hoods, and then going to the mayor and saying, "Look, pay me. I brought you cobras. Um, let's make. I want to make money." So the unintended consequence is the cobra population actually boomed. Prohibition is a perfect example of an unintended consequence. So prohibition gets enacted, alcohol goes away. What happens? Organized crime booms. You got Al Capone here, and they're what are they doing? Well, they're running booze, and it makes perfect sense because the market didn't go away when you made it illegal. It just shifted somewhere else. So the unintended consequence, negative externality, crime goes way up in the 1930s. Gun buyback programs. A lot of people like to look at gun buyback programs and say, wow, if you pay people to get rid of their guns, then eventually guns go away. And what they found is in gun buyback programs is what they will do is they will sell their old guns, take the money they get from their old guns and turn around and buy new guns. And so actually you do have less guns out there in society, but what happens is that a small amount of people go out there and start buying a whole lot of guns with the money they got from selling off their old guns. Seatbelt laws, an example of an unintended consequence. Okay, so when they enacted seatbelt laws, all of a sudden traffic accidents went up. Why? Because people started to actually drive faster when seatbelt laws became required. And it kind of makes sense that people say, well, I'm safer because I'm wearing a seatbelt, so I'm going to drive more recklessly, I'm going to drive quicker. Bogota, Colombia. This is a great example of an unintended consequence. Traffic was so bad and pollution was so bad in Bogota that they said that based on your license plate, you could only drive every other day of the week. Like if you had a certain license plate, you couldn't be on the road on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You could only be on the road Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that's going to get rid of traffic, right? No, people went out and bought a second car with a license plate so they could drive every day of the week. So it actually increased traffic. So these are examples of unintended consequences when you put out incentives. And remember, an incentive basically is trying to get people to change their behavior in a certain way. Same with a disincentive. And these things are powerful. And what we're going to see in economics and government is that people try to create incentives that are going to change people's behavior to get society to be better off.